and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Adam Stokes. I'm the chairman of this board. Councillor Tom Smith, vice chairman of the board, is also in attendance to my right. Can I remind you that the audio-video feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcasted live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. And with this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and press that are watching this live. I'd like to welcome the executive councillors and executive support councillors who are attending our meeting today. And I'd also like to welcome the following members of the corporate leadership team who are here today: Debbie Barnes, the chief executive, Andrew Crookham, the deputy chief executive, and Andy Gutherson. Health and safety, I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the doors behind you and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We will then need to wait in the car park for further instructions. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting? And also, when invited to speak, can you please ensure that you switch on your microphone? Otherwise, those attending the meeting via Teams and members of the press and public listening to our meeting online won't be able to hear you. Please be aware that you will need to speak directly into the microphones to be heard. The hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand, and Councillor Tom Smith will make a note. We'll try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. However, I will close down the debate to ensure we keep to time. Therefore, I would appreciate contributions to be quick and concise, and also that you indicate early when you wish to speak. We will now move on to the formal agenda. So item 1, apologies for absent and replacement members. Emily, do we have any, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillors Brooks, Carrington and Pepper, and we also have Councillor Skinner in attendance today as a substitute for Councillor Pepper.
Thank you for those. So item 2, declarations of members' interests. Members of the boards are reminded that you only need to declare any relevant interests which have not been declared on the declaration of pecuniary interest form. Do any members wish to declare an interest today? No, thank you. And we'll move on to item 3. And this is to confirm, this is the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of October 2023. And this is to confirm and sign the minutes from the last meeting of the board on the 26th of October as a correct record. These can be found on pages 7 to 14th of the agenda pack. Do we have a proposer for those, please? Councillor Kendrick, a seconder. Councillor Macy. All those in favour of those minutes, please? Thank you. Do we have any against or any abstentions? Thank you, 1 abstention. Thank you, those are agreed. We'll now go to announcements by chairman, executive councillors and chief officers. I do not have any announcements today. However, I would like to point that we have a very tight and busy agenda that includes the consideration of 4 pre-decision items. I should therefore like to begin by asking those presenting reports to take them as read by members and only summarise key points and the type of input expected by the board. Introductions of the reports will be capped at 5 minutes to ensure that we have sufficient time to consider and debate. I also intend to take a 10-minute comfort break between items 6 and 7. Are there any executive councillor announcements? No. And any chief officer announcements? No, thank you. So we'll now move on to item 4, which is consideration of call-ins. Emily, are there any call-ins to consider?
No, none received, Chairman.
Thank you. And item 5, consideration of councillors' calls for action. Have we received any?
No, none received.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the first item of substantive, which is item 6, which is consideration and approval a devolution proposal for Greater Lincolnshire and commencement of consultation activities. So the devolution deal for Greater Lincolnshire proposal was published as part of the government's autumn statement on Wednesday the 22nd of November. The report to the leader of the council, which can be found on pages 19 to 200, asks for A, the approval of a proposed deal for Greater Lincolnshire, B, the approval of a draft proposal to create a new Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority to give greater effect to the deal, and C, the approval for carrying out a public consultation as per arrangements proposed in paragraphs 26 to 30 of the report and in Appendix C. A decision will be taken by the leader of the council on the 1st of December 2023. So our actions are that we consider and support the report on 1, the terms of the proposed devolution deal for Greater Lincolnshire, 2, a draft proposal for the creation of a new Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority to give effect to the devolution deal, and 3, we carry out the carrying out of the public consultation to inform a later decision whether the Council should submit a formal proposal to the Secretary of State under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 for the creation of the Greater Lincolnshire Mayoral Combined County Authority. That's a tongue twister. So comments from the debate will be shared with the Leader of the Council in relation to this item by a designated scrutiny officer. So we'll now hand over to Lee Surderfield, who will be presenting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So just in terms of context and to add to what you've said, back in December 22, we published a devolution prospectus that set the policy intention for how the devolution negotiation should work. Since May of this year, we've been negotiating with government across the 3 upper tier councils to secure a devolution deal for Greater Lincolnshire. That deal has been described by the Minister as the most ambitious deal that they have done, achieving a £750 million investment into Greater Lincolnshire over the next 30 years. The paper sets out the content of that and the various items that we've got, including an investment fund, tactical funding that will be spent in 2024, multi-year transport settlements, adult education budgets, etc. So there's a wide range of elements within that which provides greater local control and decision making over a broad agenda area. There is a requirement for the Council to convert the deal document into a proposal document, and that is within your pack. And the proposal document is what is used for the consultation exercise. So we're asking for consideration of that. Through the consultation exercise, which is expected to last for 8 weeks, from the 4th of December to 29th of January, we'll be holding 18 public events, also undertaking engagement with seldom heard groups, voluntary organisations, businesses, other representative bodies, etc. And all of that will be used to update the proposal document and to inform next steps. And we'd be seeking to come back, subject to support being given to the Leader's decision. We'd be coming back in March with any revisions and recommendations. So nothing further to add, Chairman, beyond what you've already set out.
Thank you for that. Do we have any comments or questions for Lee? Or does the Leader want to make any comment on the devolution paper? As he's just...
No, not at... obviously, we're debating it tomorrow at Council, so I'll just listen to the debate, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments from the board? Councillor Brockway, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. A very interesting document. I mean, absolutely huge achievement to get this far with this. I have lots of questions, like lots of people, but the one or two, if I could just ask now, because this is just approving the process to take us to consultation, isn't it? This isn't actually approving the document now, is it? Just to be clear.
So we're asking for the proposal document to be supported and for the Leader to be supported in using that document for a consultation process.
That's fine, thank you. Could I just ask one question then? We're going to be combining with other authorities. Is there any safety net if any of the authorities involved should suffer something like the effective bankruptcies we're seeing in some authorities around the country? Thank you.
Good question, considering the news over the last few days. So we are creating, through these proposals, a mayoral combined county authority. That is a separate institution. So that will have its own financial arrangements, its own financial plan, etc. And we are not exposed to additional risk from other organisations as a result of doing that. So that organisation will have to put forward a budget, it will have to fund its activity. Clearly the County Council can contribute towards that, but should another party be unable to meet their contribution, it wouldn't create a liability on the county.
That's very reassuring, thank you. Could I just ask then, with the significant sums that are part of this deal, so on the basis of what you're saying, there is no danger, is there, of any of that extra money being sucked into a black hole from an authority that may not be functioning properly?
No, not at all. So whilst the funding is devolved, the funding is devolved for certain purposes. So, for example, transport funding is for transport purposes. Adult education budget has a set of conditions around it to ensure that that is spent in terms of adult education. So that wouldn't be diverted into other areas. So no.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. My first point is actually a positive one. I'd like to say how much I welcome within the proposal document. There is an explicit reference to making Lincolnshire a place where the defence industry can come and expand in Lincolnshire. We obviously, for obvious historical reasons, are known as Bomber County and have a history of innovation and defence being at the heart of Lincolnshire. So it's most welcome that this is explicitly referenced in the document, and hopefully we can continue to expand the defence sector in Lincolnshire to create the high-wage, high-quality job economy we all want to see. My other point, Chairman, and it's a very brief one, and it may be more a political point than officers can answer, is that the public will obviously have concerns with a new layer of government, especially around a mayor. How will we ensure that the functions that we hold and districts hold are not, if you like, usurped into the powers of one man or woman, and that ultimately the power, those of us where the power sits are ultimately accountable to our electorate in its exercise still once if this devolution deal goes through. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the use of power, within the proposal document, there's a section that sets out the governance arrangements. They seek to protect interests of the constituent authorities and non-constituent decision making. So for things like planning powers, for example, are retained by our district, city and borough council colleagues. The organisation can't create a liability on a constituent authority, and there are a set of powers around budgets to ensure that we agree to the budget provision that is put through. It's worth recognising that the mayoral authority will be receiving new powers and new funding. So this isn't, with the exception of some transport arrangements, this isn't moving things from others up. Transport is the only exception to that. This is bringing things down from central government to here. So this doesn't see that other movement and create that environment that you've described. The only way that things can move into the mayoral authority is with agreement to do that. So there's protection against what you've set out.
Yeah. Thank you for the answer, Lee. That's very, very helpful. I'm having read both documents. I'm aware of that. It was more if you like, a semi-rhetorical question of how do we explain that to the public, because that's very difficult to explain, because not every single member of the public is going to sit and read through 200 plus pages of proposal and deal documents. So it's how we explain that to the public.
Councillor Hill.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Obviously, so far, obviously, after following the announcement, obviously we're not in consultation mode because that requires the three upper tier councils to agree this. But I think there is most of the comments from the public are about the mayor, not surprisingly, and very little about all the other benefits. And I think that's where a lot of the debate will lie. I think there is a misapprehension because this is actually not an extra tier of government, and I think people understandably don't realise that the mayor will not be in charge of ourselves or district councils or anybody else. The mayor will be, in effect, a chairman of a partnership board. There are, as Lee has just said, there are some specific powers which the mayor has, which aren't very many, which he or she can do. But I think people realised it was more about chairing a partnership board, bringing all the public sector and business together in Lincolnshire to actually collectively agree what we want to achieve for our county, and then that person will then be empowered to go and bang the drum at government level to get to the extra resources. So I think people think it's going to be a massive organisation, which it won't be, and I think in part of drawing up the governance is what we've tried to do is make sure this mayoral county combined authority will be as small and as lean and mean as possible, and nearly all the work that is currently done by councils will continue to do so. There is, as Leah said, the issue, some subtleties around the local transport plan, which will be done across the whole of Greater Lincolnshire, which I think in principle sounds a good idea, but aside from that, everything else that will be done locally, and unless there are specific reasons why they can't be. So I think the issue to me is that we can see the benefits, but I think we need to convince the public that we are not, this mayor will not be in charge of us. I mean, I get emails from people telling me that they're really upset with ex-district council, and what are you going to do about it? And an email back and say, well, I'm sorry, it's a matter of them. And I get an email, well, you're in charge of them, aren't you? So just tell them. So I think there is a misunderstanding out there of who does what. And the mayor is a government requirement that we have one. But I think if you have the right mayor chairing a partnership board in a collective way, which happens in most areas, but not all, that can only be for the benefit of Lincolnshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments? Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to the leader for clarifying that point, because only last night at a parish council meeting, that's the thing that was said to me, oh, we're having another layer of bureaucracy. So I'm glad that clarification's been made. My question is, it says in the document, the elected mayor will have the power to issue a precept on local council tax bills to help pay for the mayor's work. This precept can only be raised for mayoral functions. Are there any restrictions on the extent of the precept he can raise? I'm thinking in terms of councils have restrictions, they can go to a certain limit, and then it has to be dealt with. So I was just wondering if that's, I may have missed it in the document, but I just wonder if there's any sort of controls on that. Thanks, Chairman.
So we expect that the precept charged by the mayor fits into the existing council tax rules for precepts. So obviously government policy changes on that from time to time, but generally that prevents a significant precept being raised and putting council tax up by more than an agreed percentage. We're not expecting any variance to that position.
Thank you for that.
Thanks very much for the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dilks, please.
Thank you. I appreciate what you say at the start of the debate about keeping comments quick and let's get through it, and restricting introductions. I note the introduction was less than 2 minutes. It's a big issue, and I would remind members, this today, I appreciate what the leader says, that tomorrow we have the debate in full council, of course, but this is the opportunity for proper scrutiny. And I'm not sure we're actually being given that, frankly. And less than 24 hours later, we'll be, asked to vote on whether we want to proceed, to the next stage. That said, I, like many, have got huge reservations. I'm not against devolution. I'm for it. I'm for making decision-making as close to people as it can be, and closer than it is currently. I'm not sure this does that in all cases. It may in some, of course. I'm also concerned, I hear what Martin, Councillor Hill says about, the mayor's not going to be in charge of us, but as Councillor Kendrick rightly says, he or she is going to have tax raising powers. That is a matter of concern, I've got to say. I I thought it was a bit vague, the answer, if I might say so. I'm not sure what restrictions there will be on that, what limits there might be. I didn't really get the answer to that, if I might say. And then I say, what about, question I would have, what about the mayor, he or her self, will they, is there anything to stop in the 200-page document before us, is there anything to stop the elected mayor being a serving member of any of the constituent authorities? I don't think there is. And I am aware that in the East Midlands, the so-called East Midlands, I always thought we were part of the East Midlands, but in the East Midlands Devo deal, I understand there is a specific, or I've certainly seen press coverage that says if one of the candidates who's currently the leader of one of the constituent authorities gets elected, he will have to stand down in that role. So I have that reservation and that question. I also look at the money, and we've all got big ambitions for Lincolnshire, but frankly, the 24 million a year bribe is, to go down this route is not much. It's it's a lot of money, of course, but in comparison with how much we've lost from government in the past 10 years in our annual grant, my reckoning by the figures published by the county council itself is that we're now down £130 million a year on what we were receiving from government just 10 years ago. And now, they're saying, well, if you go along with this, this great deal, it's going to be supercharged and all the rest. I've seen those words in here as well. I just think, what's that about? It's going to be supercharged and it's going to be wonderful. What the offer is, they're going to give us back some of the crumbs from the table that they've took away from us over the past 10 years. So I have serious reservations on that score. I've got lots of questions, I've got to say. As colleagues have said, yes, out there, members of the public are concerned. I don't know if you saw the television coverage last night on East Midlands today. The main, what do we need a mayor for? Who's going to cover from, it was focused on Stamford, that particular coverage. I don't know if colleagues saw it, but, members were saying, and it was the, you could say, the bias from the reporter was saying, what do you want to see a mayor that is going to cover from Stamford to 80 miles away in Scunthorpe? And, clearly the answer was no. So I do worry about the consultation that is coming. I would much prefer a proper referendum to ask the people what they think to the idea of an elected mayor. And whilst I understand what Councillor Hill's saying and respect all the work that's gone on in getting to the point that you've got to, I really do. I think most people out there see it as an extra tier of government, a new layer of government. I'll say no more about that just now, but that's what people will see it as. And then, so I think my final point I'd just make now is, as colleagues have actually alluded to, what happens if it does all go wrong and we don't like it in 3 or 5 years' time? Bristol, for example, went down the road of a mayor, as I understand, and they had a referendum to change. They recently had a referendum earlier this year, I understand, to go back to the committee system of local government. So I kind of worry what's the mechanism in our deal. I find it interesting that we don't need a referendum to go into this, but Bristol apparently needed one to come out of it. So that kind of worries me. What happens if we don't like it? What happens if we do get a mayor, for example, from Scunthorpe or Brigg or Immingham or somewhere? How are they going to, even know where Deeping is, which is the area I represent? And it takes me, and I'll say this tomorrow if I may, it takes me longer to get to Immingham, if I ever wanted to go there, than it does to get to London. So devolution, Not sure. I just pose those questions or comments, if I may. Thank you for your indulgence, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Hill first, please.
I'll try and answer some of the political points, and obviously I think if Councillor Dilks wants to come back with more questions, very happy to. I'm sure hopefully we can have a thorough debate here. First of all, in terms of, just to answer the precept question, well, and I think there is a clarification required, because it does say in the deal that you can only precept for mayoral functions. So I think there's a clear issue to make sure. I don't know whether it's been clarified anywhere else in terms of that. I'm aware that there's only one or two mayoral combined authorities that actually use that precepting power, and I think the view certainly of the three upper tier leaders is that, like most other combined authority areas, the respective councils will fund the mayor and an office, and also we will between us supply things like a monitoring officer and a section 151 officer. So the intention for Lincolnshire is to make that the office as small as possible, while at the same time giving the mayor the power to go and do what they have to do. So there would be a precept. I think it would be limited, and in the scheme of things on a council tax, it would, even if the mayor did decide, in terms of impact, it would be minimal, I suspect, because a bit like a parish council or something like that, that's your sorting of those sort of levels. I think Councillor Dilks makes a very valid point about whether the mayor should also be a councillor. And my understanding is that he's currently, I think Chief Vicar is going to help me on that before I go any further.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hill. We were discussing it last night as well. So you're right, Councillor Dilks, it isn't in the proposal, because in the legislation, the mayor cannot be a councillor of a constituent authority. Clearly, the legislation is silent on a non-constituted member, which would be the district councils, but the legislation is clear that the mayor cannot be an elected member of the constituent councils.
Right, so, Phil, if you want to be mayor, you'll have to resign as a councillor. I thought that is useful, but I think obviously I hope that if we go down this road, we get a successful mayor with business experience who has got the ability to bring people together. In terms of the funding, yes, I think we're back to the fair funding argument, and yes, I think it's a little bit misleading to say we've lost 113 million, because we have indeed grant, but in terms of, if you add things in like Better Care Fund and other grants we've received, it's a more nuanced picture. But I do take the point that the campaign for get more money into Lincolnshire, and this is part of that, I would say, because it will be more than 24 million. For example, we've just agreed with government that £20 million of schemes, which will happen almost immediately if the three councils agree. There is an agreed package now, which I hope to announce tomorrow, of 20 million infrastructure schemes, basically, which can happen next year before we get into the annual 24 million. There's an additional just under £20 million coming in for adult education. Then there's various sections of money which we'll also get, 3 million here, 4 million there, and £500,000 here. So it does actually mount up. And of course, this is, if you look at what happens at other mayoral deals, this is the first deal, and they're already, if this is agreed, civil servants are already saying that they are intending to start deal 2, is it? Or whatever they call it, something like that. Deal what? Deal 4. And if you look what's happened in Birmingham and the Manchesters, they have actually, as they've progressed, they've got lots more funding and resources. And actually, when I go to regional meetings, it is very frustrating that areas which have mayoral combined deals seem to be getting, and the government's doesn't hide this fact, that obviously the preferential treatment will be given to those areas which do have a mayoral combined authority. I think the other thing I would say about the argument about the geography, of course we have a Greater Lincolnshire Local Enterprise Partnership already, which is from the Humber to the Wash, and I have to say that's been very successful, and I don't think there's been any part of Lincolnshire which can argue that it hasn't received some support for the whole area. And what I found in terms of working with partners across the whole of Greater Lincolnshire is we all actually pretty quickly agree what's best. So I'm very confident if you did have a mayor, again, who will not be running the services which are currently being run by councils. It is all about that bringing together for the strategic decision making, if you like, bringing partners together and going forward on that basis. I think I've answered all of Councillor Dilks's questions, but I think there are certainly some valid issues in there which I understand.
Thank you for that. Do you want to come back in, Lee?
Just in terms of your Bristol point, Bristol wasn't a devolution deal. It was changes to the way that the City Council operate. So it was a different scenario.
Do you want to come back in, Councillor Dilks?
If I may, thank you for the clarification. And you know, I respect you know, the both sides of the argument. I've got to say, you know, I can see the benefits. I'm not sure there's anything or much in the paper about the downsides. And in most decisions that we take, there are downsides that we have to weigh up, and it is a balance, isn't it? So I just wonder if we could, you know, what are the downsides, please, that even those that want to see this deal go through will accept and can see. I hear what Martin, Councillor Hill, says about the running costs, and it'll be this or the constituent councils that'll fund the mayor's office. But people will be asking, and already asking, what's it going to cost to set up and run? You know, what is the extra cost? I appreciate there may well be benefits, you know, balanced against that. Where is the office going to be? I know, I know. It will be, you know, seen as rather different if it's in Barton-on-Humber or Immingham than it is if it were in Lincoln or even deep in St James, Martin. Yeah. But may I just sit? I hear the point on the thank you about Bristol, you know, not being a Devo. I hear that point. But you know, just looking at the sort of Greater Lincolnshire concept, I hear about the you know, already there's some aspects that are covered with Greater Lincolnshire. But if you look at the One Yorkshire concept that was looked at some years ago, when Yorkshire was sort of looking at devolution deals, they originally the One Yorkshire concept was. You know, it was going to be one authority for Yorkshire. And the government dismissed that, or it was dismissed by ministers on the understanding or the basis that Yorkshire wasn't a viable economic entity in its own right. How does anybody think that Greater Lincolnshire fits that bill? You know, a one economic entity. It doesn't. We are very diverse, I would argue, you know, from agriculture to the south bank of the Humber. And I've got to say, I'll say it tomorrow as well, but, you know, my worry about the whole deal is, what do we get out of it? I can see what the south bank of the Humber gets out of it, given that the government wants to promote Freeport in Immingham and so on. But I'm just a bit worried, well, I'm more than a bit worried, about what do we write in the south of the county? What benefit is it for us? We'll be seen as the rich relatives, which I don't think we are, I think. But that's speculation, of course, isn't it? I understand. Can I ask one last final point, if I may? And I'll shut up then, I promise. Thank you, Adam. Could you just say a bit more about transport? How... You know, where are we left on our functions on transport? It seems to me that devolution over transport may be going in the opposite direction to local decision making, and it becomes more of a regional programme. And I can see there may be benefits in some of that, but I just asked that question: how are we going to be fixed on transport? You know, as our I'll shut up on that, but thank you very much, Chairman.
Lee, do you want to start that, please?
Okay, so in terms of transport, as Councillor Hill set out, the local transport plan would be developed by the mayoral authority, so that sees the plan across Greater Lincolnshire. That gives some benefits in terms of economies of scale and the ability to work across borders, which in many ways for transport routes are relatively artificial borders. There is ability to enhance investment through the mayoral investment fund and through the mayoral authority, and the papers highlight the designation of a key route network, which would see a focus on movement of goods and services. Now, clearly, as constituent authorities, we are influencing that local transport plan. So we are having a say in what goes into that plan. We are helping to design it and helping to ensure that the priorities for Lincolnshire are properly represented within that plan. So we stay close to that. There are provisions within the governance arrangements around how those local transport plans are approved, and that gives us some control over the content of that. Also within the devolution deal and the proposal are some enhanced arrangements around rural transport provision. So it sees the mayoral authority creating and chairing a rural transport board. That is working with Department for Transport to bring in additional funding and to bring in piloting activities to Greater Lincolnshire, which would seek to enhance rural bus travel within the area, as well as wider arrangements in terms of rail travel, air travel, etc., that are set out within the document. So whilst some of it goes up a level, we're very, very close to the detail of that and have a very strong voice in the detail, but it opens the door to much more strategic conversations with government to put Greater Lincolnshire at the forefront of that debate. So I think the paper is really strong in terms of how it recognises transport needs in a rural area compared to what's been done in previous mayoral authorities, which have predominantly been urban.
And Andy Gutherson wants to come in as well, please.
Yeah, if I can just add to what Lee's just said there, Councillor Dilks, in the context of the setting of a policy and a strategy, we have informal relationships with the other constituent authorities. As Lee indicated, the road network doesn't respect the boundaries between the individual authorities. So we already work closely to make sure that those key economic routes are important for moving goods and services around. I think the other thing which probably has been asked a few questions about is those strategic relationships do not impact on the role that each of the three constituent authorities has of highway authorities. So we will continue to be the highway authority responsible for the delivery of the maintenance of our highway routes on a day-to-day basis. So those sort of concerns, which I know have been raised already, are not affected by the devolution deal.
Councillor Hill, you want to come back in?
I think the broad answer to Councillor Dilks' question, yes. I mean, if you want to work in genuine partnership, you probably need to be flexible about not jealously guarding everything you do. And I think those mayoral combined authorities which have been successful have actually done that. And there's always this, do you want things to stay the same or are you prepared to be flexible? So I think in general terms, I think that's a sort of, I won't say dilemma, it's a balance of decision making you've got to make. And there are one or two not successful mayoral combined authorities, one of which isn't a million miles away from the Deepings market, is if everybody's is jealously, won't give up anything, the net result is nothing happens. So I think that is why, and I understand why the government is very clear it doesn't want vetoes, because once somebody has a veto, in effect, things tend not to happen because there's always somebody who's a bit not sure. In answer to his questions about the Yorkshire and the economic area, well, I come back to the LEP. We have a success for 10 years now. We've had Greater Lincolnshire Local Enterprise Partnership, which actually has been successful and is recognised as a good area. And he talked about Yorkshire. Well, of course, North Yorkshire and York are about to have a mayoral combined authority, and they're probably not quite as big as Greater Lincolnshire, and also East Yorkshire and Hull have been announced as well. So those big geographies, and I think we've got to accept with very large geographies, there are always boundaries where your North Yorkshire, for example, boundaries the northeast to their north, and obviously Hull to the south, and South Yorkshire. So there's always this overlap, but I think it's to me that how that works is that you have a geography and you work together not only within your own geographical area, but also all around the peripherals. It's not just about Hull, it will be about partnership with the likes of Peterborough and Nottingham and so on and so forth, making sure that the whole county combined area actually gets a good benefit. And I think the LEP has a very strong record in that regard. In terms of the cost, well, obviously the Mayor will get a salary, yet to be agreed, but that I believe our friends, the numeration panel, will decide what that should be. And the Deputy Mayor will get a salary as long as they're not a councillor. So if you're, again, if you're, say, if the leader of a council or on a council, you will not get any extra payment for being on the Mayoral Combined Authority, just as you don't get any payment for being on the LEP board and all the rest of it. I think some independent members will get a salary, which yet to be determined, just those who aren't councillors. And apart from that, it should be a small office. And I think there will be some confusion because currently, I don't know what the cost of running the Greater Lincolnshire LEP is, but there is a cost there. That cost will transfer. So I think what we've got to identify, what would be the additional cost of having a mayoral office. And I think just, you know, some of the stuff on Facebook, the mayor's going to get £24 million a year to play with or something, and all these councillors are all going to get more money, because obviously public don't understand that we only get one special responsibility allowance per council, so we can, you know, have all the extra roles we take on, they're just assumed to come part of your basic salary. So there will be a cost, of course there will, but I think in the scheme of things it will be quite a minimal cost, and that's certainly the way that we want it to work. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Lee, please.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't really going to say very much because for me I thought the opportunity for full discussion was tomorrow, but I do feel bound to just echo some of Councillor Dilks's concerns. For me, the principle of devolution is a positive one. I'm supportive of the idea, but the concerns, and I suspect they're not just from our groups, there really is concern around the Mayor. There's concern about the cost of his office, his or her office, the salary, the staffing. There's concerns about the levels of power the Mayor will have, concerns actually. Debbie very light-heartedly said in a meeting that it could be a celeb. Heaven forbid, just heaven forbid. Let's hope it's someone sensible, but we don't know, do we? That's the whole point, we don't know. I thought that the point about restrictions on a precept was a good point, and I did feel that the answer was a bit woolly as well, and I don't really feel that I mean, yes or no, are there restrictions on the amount of precept they can raise? And if there are restrictions, what exactly are those restrictions? I don't know if that's for today or for tomorrow. The amount of funding we're getting, any amount of funding is positive, but 24 million, when you put it in the context of what's been cut over the years, and actually what we spend on our budgets as well, it's not huge, but it's something, but it's not great. I too feel this has been rushed. The council meeting was brought forward a week, you know, and I just think, why did we have to do that? And as much as anything, for councillors who work, and there are some that are, you know, employment, you know, bringing it forward a week could cause huge problems on something that's a big issue, and people need to be able to be at that meeting. But it does feel rushed. And as I say, I'm pragmatic. I think that there are good points and bad, and it's a balance. But, I mean, in truth, we sit in that political chamber every full council, and I always jokingly say, well, that was a close vote. And it is a joke, of course. This will, tomorrow, we know this vote will go through, but I'm pragmatic about it, and I'm trying to be sensible about it, but we do have concerns. I think the main one is about the Mayor. And in the consultation, anybody who, like me, sits and watches Peter Levy when they're eating their evening meal will know from the last few nights, people are worried about a mayor. They don't really want a mayor. And it would have been nice if in that paper we could say, do you want a mayor or not? But we all know that if we ask people that, more of them are going to say no than yes. But I'm trying to be pragmatic about this, and I think tomorrow's the opportunity for full debate, really. Thank you.
Lee, do you want to just go over the precept part of the question, please?
Yeah, of course. So, so in terms of the precept, the Secretary of State sets out the conditions for a precept, and they do that each year, and that has a threshold that a council tax bill can go up by. Okay, so the precept needs to work within those thresholds. Those thresholds change from time to time, but it's typically, I think typically it's around 5%, isn't it, that the threshold goes up to for the bill. So we're not expecting anything different to that, but I suppose the point is that is determined by the Secretary of State.
Councillor Hill.
I mean, obviously, I think it's clear that because it does refer in the document to it can only be for mayoral powers, and I think we want to bear down that as well. And I agree with Councillor Lee. Everybody's the public are just talking about the mayor. The rest of it sort of passing them by. All I would say also is in terms of to run a mayoral office will cost whatever it costs, and we can only estimate that. But in the scheme of on your council tax precept bill, I mean, it will be. I'm pretty confident in more like near a parish council than even a district council. I would also say that the mayor will be, of course, elected. And will that mayor want a special line on your council tax bill saying X for the mayor? So which I think why most mayors actually do prefer to be funded through the councils. But of course, the power is there should they choose to do so. And I think it is the consultation will be all about the mayor. And the truth of the matter is that the government is saying, if you want these benefits, if you want the money, and it will be a lot more than £24 million. And I say £24 million a year is a lot every single year, 720 for the 30 years, for example. But that's the condition, yes, and I'm sure, I think nobody's made a secret of it, that if left to our own devices, we'd have probably preferred a partnership or something like that. But if you go down that road, you lose the money, and you lose that, probably a golden opportunity, I would say, to make sure that Lincolnshire is actually there at the top table with one of 11 other mayoral combined authorities. And in the past, we've always suffered. We've been part of somewhere else. We're in Councillor Dilks mentioned the East Midlands Regional Assembly. We got the scraps from the table. The same happens in North Lincolnshire. They get the scraps from Yorkshire and Humberside region. So I'm very clear that one of the massive benefits of doing this is if Lincolnshire, 1.1 million, we are very proud of our county, all of us, and that sets us up as a standalone area which holds its head high and actually gets more resources from government. So that's my view. But I think the mayor is the thing, and if it wasn't for the mayor, I suspect the consultation would come back massively in favour of doing it. So I think in terms of consultation, for those of us who support this, it is trying to get the public to understand what's involved with having a mayor, and it's not this all-powerful being who's going to boss everybody about and tell us all what to do. But I think we understand that, but the rules of the government are clear, and over the last 10 years, I think all of us have said, well, do we have to have the mayor? And what's been consistent from the government since 2015, when the Scottish referendum, they are insisting on having a mayor. And I don't know about if we have a Labour government. I suspect, although they are clearly keen on devolution, clearly are want to go down that road, nor they're sort of making warm words about, being a bit more flexible. I'm not sure when it comes down to it, we'll be in the same place. I don't discern, I don't know if the Chief Exec can help, it's a bit of a political question. I don't discern much difference between the Conservative and the Labour national position on this.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose a couple of things just to add to that, and certainly at the recent CCN conference that we were at, there certainly does seem to be commitment for devolution across both of the main parties. Just, I suppose, a couple of other things really to link in and just provide additional clarity to what's been said. The first one is just to say that for the first 3 years we do get a grant for set-up costs. So it's included in the paper that we get £500,000, then £1 million, and then £500,000 to support the mayoral running of the office. So certainly anything for the mayor's office, clearly we wouldn't see happening in the first 3 years anyway, because we're given money to set that up. I just also think it's worth clarifying the difference between the mayoral combined authority budget and the mayor's budget. The vast majority of the funding that we've been talking about, the mayoral investment fund, which is the 24 million, the transport monies, the adult skills money, is the mayoral combined authorities budget that would be voted on by the mayoral combined authority. And for that budget to be passed, and here I'm going to look at Lee to make sure that I say the right thing, is that there must be a majority and all 3 leaders of the constituent councils must be in support of the budget. That's for the large amounts of money. Clearly then the mayor can, or she can, if they so wish, request to apply a precept to support the running of the mayor's office, which, as you've heard, the discussions has been that that should be as slim as possible. Again, just to say, it's really difficult at this stage to say how big or how small it could be, because whilst any additional costs we'd want to minimise, we recognise that there are officers already working across the 3 councils that may be able to work even more effectively if they worked together, or indeed across the 10 councils that may be able to work together better and more efficiently. And obviously that will only need, to be discussed in time. But with regard to the apply a precept, the restrictions that are placed on the mayor are slightly different to the 3 leaders and incredibly technical. And every time I try and explain it, I get it wrong. So I'm going to get Lee to do that bit.
So there's basically 2 tests. So the mayor can't just wake up one morning and decide to precept. The mayor has to put that forward as part of the budget, the mayoral budget, which is purely for those mayoral running costs, as Debbie has explained. The starting point is that that can be amended if 2/3 of the constituent members request an amendment to be made. And then we have an additional threshold which says if the first test hasn't been passed, if 2 leaders from the constituent authorities and 1 other member from the constituent authorities asked for the budget to be amended, then that budget would be amended. So there is provision in there to provide an opportunity for review and change on that budget. So it isn't an automatic right to precept.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Very much welcome this paper. This debate has been had at leader level for quite a, we're talking in years, not months. And it is for those leaders to communicate what's been happening down to their individual councillors. So there should actually be no surprises with this whatsoever. For me, in the words of Eisenhower, there's always opportunity. And this is a big job, a new job, and a very important job for Lincolnshire. This is about partnership and future generations, bringing in the monies and advancing the skills for the community. In defining the role, in fact, the person that takes the first part of this role up will have to define that themselves. I'm picked up on what Councillor Hill said and Debbie said. It's all right trying to define something. The person that takes this has a real opportunity to drive this on and really benefit all communities in Lincolnshire and reach out even into the deepings. This is not just about sitting on your haunches. This is about devolving more powers from central so we get those discussions and the choices at local level. And just as an antidote, I actually pitched against the Bristol Mayor last year at lunchtime at the LGA conference, and I knocked his socks off. Thank you.
Councillor Hill, please.
Just, sorry, I think if Lee could reply to Councillor Lee, we apologise for the moving of the meeting. It's all to do with, believe it or not, Purder in North East Lincolnshire in next, but I'll let Lee explain it.
Apologies for that inconvenience. The timelines that we're working to with colleagues in DLUC are incredibly tight. We have at the far end of the decision-making process North East Lincolnshire going into Purder, so are seeking to get decisions through ahead of that to prevent decisions relating to devolution being delayed by a number of months in effect, and the consequential impact of that. So for us to hit timelines that government have set out, we had to shuffle. All three authorities are shuffling meetings, so the impact has been spread and will be in the future, but we do understand the impact that would have had.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councillor Marfleet, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry for being a bit late. Well, it's excellent news, this is. I'm all for it, bringing the sort of Lincolnshire, Greater Lincolnshire, all back together and actually with a common goal, and the steer is really good news. I've gone through the paper. I mean, it is detailed. It's focused. You know, the mayor can't just run riot, that's for sure. He's pretty much pinned down. He's got 6 votes actually against him if he gets a bit gun-ho. So, and it's all that 2/3 and 1/3, and actually, so we are quite safe. And it's not about gun-ho-ness either. It's about actually working together. And if you actually can't agree at the top table, we've got a bit of a problem. So it is finding the solutions. It's very focused, it's very detailed, it really is. I mean, this document, we can actually hold the mayor to account. There is no doubt about it. It's mapped out every single aspect. That said, there is a lot in there, and actually to deliver on every single aspect in that document is actually quite something. So we'll have to be quite focused and really sort of be quite clever in the way we do it. I mean, having been involved in actually most things that align to this, with agriculture, with food and everything else, I can see where we can get quick wins, and I can see where we can get completely bogged down. But it is good news, and we can get there. I think there is some alignments to be done with the county council and the district council, really to get a bit more behind and support the sort of pushing through the agenda, but they're sort of all minor tweaks. As for the mayor, you know what, I've seen it written down in the document, and actually it does look good. It's got a bit of grandeur and status about it, actually, and I think we'll all get behind it. And I'm actually really, I wasn't particularly keen in the first place, but I quite like the idea now, and I think it does look good on paper. We talk about it, he can be voted against. He hasn't got overall divine control. But the other areas that he has got, when you go through this document, he's got a connection with DEFRA. You know, he's got connections with departments that generally in the past we have not been able to have that connection, because the point is it's called local government. The mayor does get that extra bit of slant to this whole picture. You know, to talk to DEFRA about how we can make space for water, how we can make a better environment. I mean, for once, we are so at risk from coastal erosion and from flooding. Actually, to have that direct, we have to change some of the policies in our national DEFRA to really give us that flexibility. And for somebody to have that sort of weight to go to DEFRA, that's power, actually, and that is a benefit. So that we haven't really had before, and I think it's good that we have that accountability. So I'm all for it. The consultation part, I think in some sense there's a few areas you could have done with the word hospitality in the business sector, considering it's one of our largest sectors. in some of the views, I think you're a bit slanted and it's a bit narrow in terms of like housing. You know what, you're not going to go and build houses all over Lincolnshire. You haven't got that sort of money. And I think there is an element when you go around Lincolnshire, and I go into Grimsby and things, there is a lot of regeneration that needs to happen within existing houses. You know, we talk about affordable housing. You can go and buy an affordable housing in Grimsby. It's just whether you maybe want to live in some of those areas. But some of those areas want regenerating. And skills, we talk about skills. It's about getting the concept of careers and the opportunities through the school. It's not all about high paid, high skill. I want to see a better wage and better conditions for everybody in Lincolnshire, not just an elitist few. And I think that we can do better and we can connect better. And the whole education establishment, because it's out of our control here, especially more like your colleges, university, and your sort of further education, it does come back to at least being where we can have a bit more say here and leverage through to the mayor and actually make sure it's tied in with business. So all in all, I think it's really good news, and I think that the reality is the consultation will go out. It's just a shame we've got more questions on your colour, your sexuality and all the other bump that goes in there rather than the questions about actually what people really want. But that's part of modern day life and there's not a lot we can do about it. But all in all, good work, and actually give yourself credit because you've done a good job and the package is a good deal. And I welcome this. Thank you.
Lee, you want to come in on that?
Okay, so just to pick up on a few of those points, I think the point you make about the mayor having some gravitas and stature, I think that's a key part of devolution. So this is about, as Councillor Hill set out, the mayoral authority being one of 11 voices back into central government departments. We're currently one of over 300 voices. This will be one of 11. So we're at the table, we are able to express the needs and the wants of Greater Lincolnshire in a different way to what we have done before. That doesn't mean that the County Council stops doing that. Clearly the County Council continues, but this enables us to amplify the messages into those key audiences. DEFRA in particular are incredibly keen to work with Greater Lincolnshire. They see huge value in the industry that we have and the opportunities that are presented. And certainly through the negotiations, we're very keen to further those working relationships. And I think that is a strong connection. Equally, there are connections into DFT, into Department for Energy Security, and there are also bespoke arrangements with Department for Education, which picks up on your point of it not just being about those incredibly high paid jobs, but this is also about giving people the skills to move into the workplace and the support that they need to be able to do that. So within the papers, it sets out work with Spectra to enable us to support care leavers into employment. It sets out enhanced relationships with DWP around skills planning and future workforce planning, and how the mayoral authority will engage with DWP on that. So clearly this is end-to-end in terms of that work environment. The deal document does set out some ambitions around culture, tourism, and in so far as hospitality being included in that. So that is within that and built into the aspirations. And clearly when you look at skills, when you look at transport, when you look at the investment, that is across the entire economy. So I think that the points you've raised are valid in that sense. I think it's important that we recognise money is part of the package, but it is one part of the package. And as Councillor Skinner highlighted, it is for the mayor to create the environment, to create the impetus for change and to drive the agenda. The document set out a very clear set of aspirations for what the three constituent authorities would expect the mayor to do. and that proposal document follows through into the creation of a mayoral authority, subject to all of the support and the decisions, as does the deal document, and that sets out a very clear mandate for where we'd want to go. Now, clearly, the consultation gives the opportunity for members and for residents and businesses to also feed into that narrative, and we'll look to update the proposal document as a result of that. We know from last year businesses want to see devolution. The consultation exercise we did last year showed strong support for that, and would expect to see a similar narrative come through in this consultation, but clearly we'll build that feedback into the iteration that comes in March.
Thank you. Councillor Brockway, please.
The Chief Executive has already answered my question, Chairman.
Okay,
Thank you.
Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to try and whether this is possible or not, I don't know, which is why I'm asking the question. And this may be a partly political question, so it may be more for the leader to answer. Would it be possible, or are there legislative preventions to do this, that the leaders of the constituent authorities could make a proposal when the combined authority is formed that sets out that the costs of the mayor and their office would be funded by the councils, as with the additional powers, so there is no need for a precept to be raised in the first place. And my second point, which is in relation to the previous point that Councillor Marfleet raised, we also mustn't forget, and I declare an interest in the sense that I am one, which is Padsbrook, which is the child of the forces community. They are often also disadvantaged, although be it in different ways. There's been a number of studies. The more they move, for example, through postings of their parents, their attainment levels decrease, not as much as their civilian counterparts, but they do decrease the more they move. But they also have unique skills to offer, so it's important that we help nurture those skills, as well as our young carers as well. Thank you, Chairman.
So in terms of the cost of the mayoral office, the first thing to recognise is that the proposal document seeks to secure the power and ability to levy a precept. What it doesn't say is that a precept will be levied. There are a set of provisions, as set out earlier, that mean there has to be agreement to that precept. So the power being there doesn't mean that it will be used. In terms of committing the three organisations to funding in perpetuity, I don't think that's possible for us to do. We could remove precept in power, but I don't think it's possible for us to commit the three organisations in perpetuity, but Andrew or Debbie may clarify that further. In terms of the armed forces and families, we'd expect that the Armed Forces Covenant would apply to the mayoral authority as a public body, and clearly the organisation can make some decisions in terms of investment it wants to make in that space.
Thank you. Just to come in on that point, because as Lee has said, we do not have to put the precept powers into the proposal, and that may be something that's discussed during the consultation. DLUC strongly advised against that. Because, you know, clearly short term, that may feel fine, that may feel comfortable. But if DLUC were to have a local authority, which in essence what a combined authority is, having problems, having struggles, that it wouldn't then have an ability to be able to raise income, to be able to address any challenges that it is facing. They wouldn't want to see failure because that precept wasn't available to them, even if they decided not to use it. So you don't have to have it in, but the strong advice from DLUC was to have it in.
Thank you for that. And finally, Councillor Spratt, please.
Thank you, Chairman. If I may make a couple of general points and comments. I think there's been a problem with local government organisation and reform, certainly since I first became a councillor in the 80s. I've got to say, I personally, as a matter of principle, think the government's got it the wrong way round. I'm a big believer, and I know my friend Councillor Lee and I, at a place across the road, we've made certain speeches along the same lines about wanting unitary authorities. And I do think that the reform, and again, general comments, I do think that the reform that's been put forward is really, in my opinion, the wrong way round. I'm a big believer in unitary authorities, and I think that ought to have come first, because I think it will happen at some point, either based on the current county or on enlarged districts. However, we are where we are, and I think the COVID pandemic particularly demonstrated more than anything, from a practical point of view, the need for devolution. And I think the devolution package that's been put forward, and colleagues have said this morning, is an excellent package. It's an excellent idea, particularly in terms of economic policy and economic development. I was against the principle of an elected mayor, but like a lot of colleagues, having thought about it, and following what Councillor Marfleet said, I'm persuaded, heavily persuaded, that is the way forward. And as I said, we are where we are, whatever people think, whatever I think. And so I shall certainly be giving this my full support. Thank you, Chairman. Just a few general comments.
Thank you for those, and thank you for the comments of all the members and the officers today. So I have got a proposal here, which is I move that the board supports the recommendations detailed on page 19 of the report, and that we support the terms of the proposed devolution deal for Greater Lincolnshire and the draft proposal for the creation of a new Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority, and agree with the commissioning of a public consultation in support of a later decision for a submission to the Secretary of State for the creation of the Greater Lincolnshire Mayoral Combined County Authority. And lastly, 2, I ask that our comments are captured by Chiara, our designated scrutiny officer, be shared with the leader of the council ahead of the consideration of the decision. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Smith. So we'll now take a vote. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Those against? 2. And there will be no abstentions. Thank you, that is agreed. We'll now move on to item 7, which is the
Chairman, I wonder if my vote could be recorded against. Thank you.
We can do that. Yeah. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 7, which is the Corporate Plan Success Framework 23-24 Quarter 2. And this report invites the board to consider the performance recorded in Quarter 2 on the 23-24 Corporate Plan, which can be found in Appendix 1 on page 204. Detailed performance is also published on the Council's website. The report will be presented to the Executive on the 5th of December 2023. A decision will be taken by the Executive Councillor for People Management, Legal and Corporate Property between the 6th and the 30th of November. And our actions are that we consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendation of to the Executive as set out on page 204 of the report, and agree that our comments be passed on to the Executive in relation to this item. And this report will be presented by Caroline Jackson, Head of Corporate Performance, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so as stated, this is Quarter 2 performance, so that's to September of this year. So in terms of the corporate plan in Quarter 2, we have 40 activities that we can report on. Only 2 of those activities are RAG rated as amber, and just to remind you that amber means they are slightly behind plan but are progressing within agreed limits. The 2 activities, one of those relates to the substantial financial and operating model for the public protection function. The reason this is amber is due to some outstanding work in relation to the recruitment of appropriate staff and the development of performance frameworks and a joint commissioning framework. The second activity relates to the implementation of the Housing for Independence strategy, and specifically the listing building consent required for the Grange Farm scheme. Due to the complexities and risks of the site, the listing building consent hasn't been submitted in this quarter, but is anticipated to be submitted in Quarter 4. In terms of the key performance indicators for Quarter 2, there are 27 that can be reported against a target that we've set. Of these, 93% are either exceeding or achieving their targets. There are 6 KPIs that are exceeding their target. 3 of these were already exceeded in Quarter 1 as well, so you'll be familiar with those. They're around household waste to landfill, customer levels of satisfaction and superfast broadband. Of the other 3 measures that are exceeding their target, 2 of those relate to adult learning, and the final measure is around carers who've received a review of their needs. Just to clarify that the carers measure has gone from not achieving its target in Q1 to exceeding in Q2, and the reason behind this is that there was further work done to understand the definition of the measure that was being used, and actually what we've been able to do is more accurately reflect the performance of this service, and actually reviews across the whole adult care sector in Lincolnshire is very, very strong, and we can now see that 96% of carers have had a review of their needs, and that's done within 1 year or when there's a change in circumstance. So really positive that actually once we've there's been some changes to the carers service and the delivery of that, and we've actually now clarified and can confirm that those reviews are being undertaken. A really positive outcome. In terms of the measures that are achieving their ambition, so within the target and tolerance that we've set, there are 19 measures in Q2. There's only 4 that are newly reported in Q2. One of those relates to the percentage of children with an education, health and care plan that are in a mainstream setting. There's 2 measures around kind of early years entitlement, one around the eligibility of 2-year-olds who are in receipt of their early years entitlement, and the percentage of 3- and 4-year-olds taking up their universal entitlement. You'll recall that we discussed the measure around children in care living in a family environment in August, and we talked about removing the unaccompanied asylum seeking children from the definition of the measure in order to be more realistic reporting of performance. That has been done in this report, and you'll see that we are now within the target that has been set. Around 82% of children in care are living in a family environment. There are also measures relating to recycling at household waste centre is also achieving its target. As always, we've included a summary around the waste in the national context within the report. So to focus on the 2 measures that are not achieving their target in Q2, again, one we've discussed at length previously around the national recycling rate, and the second one is around adult carers supported in the last 12 months. There was a proposal in the commentary written in the report that we amend the target for the carers measure, but actually the Adult Care Directorate Leadership Team have subsequently discussed this and feel that it's more appropriate to take the remainder of this year to look and reflect on the work of the Lincolnshire Carers Service because of the recommissioning of the service, the new service, and ensure that we develop and propose appropriate performance measures for 24-25 and use national benchmarking data to make sure that those targets set are appropriate. As previously discussed, we also have contextual measures, so that's where the Executive Director makes a decision around RAG rating them because there are no targets set. There's one measure that's been pulled forward into the report, and that is around the flooding incidents investigated. Again, we felt it was appropriate to include, given the events of recent weeks. At the time of reporting, there were 53 ongoing Section 19 investigations. However, as a result of Storm Babette, there are now 173 new Section 19 reports of varying complexities. And obviously, it would be a lot of work to understand the causality of the flooding in various locations and often affecting multiple households. This information is also reported to Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee and was discussed at length on Tuesday. I'll now hand over for any questions.
Thank you for that. Councillor Marfleet, please.
Thank you. I just sort of reference to adults. Caroline's actually answered the bit about carers very well. I would just like to highlight that there was 2 words missing from Caroline's thing, which was smoking and alcohol, because for once we've actually hit the target. So there's no mention of them here today. All in all, actually, we only had one slight error in missing target, which was the carers. The only other one which isn't ideal is basically the health check. And we are going to deep dive a bit further into that because we're going to have to try and figure out how we get a better buy-in. We're only currently at about 50%, I think, just over, and it needs to be higher, but it's got to somehow be more flexible so that those that are working can actually sort of go and have a health check outside working hours, because most people can't afford to take a day off just to go for a health check, and we need more flexibility in the system. But other than that, all good news. So thank you, Caroline, for that.
Just wanted to clarify, yeah, obviously we had adult scrutiny performance report for Q2 yesterday, and obviously the measures that Councillor Marfleet refers to in terms of health checks obviously are within the framework for the Adult Care Scrutiny Committee, hence why they're not reported in this corporate plan report, but there is an overlap with the carers measures, just for clarification.
Thank you for that. Councillor Brockway, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you for the report. It's very interesting. I've got particular interest in page 211 of the pack, where we're talking about people accessing learning and skills. Now, if you look at the different skills that people are accessing them, it's great. They're getting a few hours guiding learning, 5 in one occasion, and there are other aspects to this learning. But I wonder how much of this is actual functional skill. Not just 5 hours of something to begin access, but functional skill, which will take them into a job. Now, you do go on and explain that there's a wide variety, GCSEs and various other things. So I just have a worry about how much of this skill that we're talking about here is of a functional level that will take these people into jobs and even careers. The other thing that worries me, we talk about the increase of people accessing learning, which is excellent news. I'm really pleased. But I'd also want to know how many of those drop out. Now, the reason I'm asking this question is I've been having discussions with business owners in my division, and there's a huge concern about particularly young people from about 18 to about 21, 22 coming in and dropping out rapidly because literally when they get into the workplace, the shock of doing the full working day and realize that they've got to go back day after day after day is actually a shock to the system because they haven't been prepared. There's no implication that these young people are lazy or not wanting to do anything. They are just not acclimatized to the concept of ongoing work. And the dropout rate is huge, absolutely huge, to the extent that some of the businesses now are not going to take them at all. They're stopping taking apprentices because they're having to do the work and they sort of drop out after a few days. And these are good employers. I've seen the business, I've seen the way these people have been treated, and it's good stuff. So there is a worry. So my question really would be, of these people who are accessing the learning, do we have an understanding of how many drop out and don't take it anywhere or don't complete the learning? And how much of this is functional learning, which will actually give them the skills that they need to go forward into a job? So it's quite big questions. I'm not saying you could answer it all now. Okay, thank you.
Andy?
I think Caroline was looking at me, Chair. So, yeah, I can't off the top of my head answer those questions, Councillor Brockway, but in the context of the functional training, that's where the skills boot camps, which are referenced, actually come into their own, and that's an area where we've had significant success and have been recognised by government and been given extra resources to run those. A lot of that work is delivered through the LEP. But I'll take away the questions in respect and get you more detail and get an answer back to you.
I was just going to add as well, it does reference, as you say, in the narrative around the functional skills in maths and English are a key element. And obviously we have had significant funding around the Multiply grant, which I believe is predominantly maths based. So again, those are obviously those functional skills. But we'll certainly bring some more information back and around that and the dropout rates.
Thank you. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Of the 57.4% of those with an EHCP who are in mainstream school, do we know the level of attainment they achieved, and do we have any data available on the level of attainment achieved by those in SEND schools with similar disabilities? If we don't have such data, is there any way this can be collected?
We do have that data and intelligence, and it would ordinarily go to Children's Scrutiny Committee, but we can certainly happily share that information.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kyle, please.
Just to pick up on page 215 and PI 10, which is around the EHCP's section as well. Is the mission here for our bar to be above the dot, showing that more schools are meeting need within mainstream, or below the dot?
Ideally, on the dot. But no, in a sense of obviously what we do with all of those measures is look at what appropriateness. So actually, what would we look at in terms of historically, in terms of the number and percentage of children with an EHCP in a mainstream setting? We know where children are waiting for places elsewhere that may be in a mainstream setting now. We look at benchmarking, so are we similar to other local authorities? So by setting that target, we believe that that is, as you say, children their needs are being met within a mainstream environment, and that is appropriate at that level.
So if it's slightly above the dot, that means more of our EHC pupils are being catered for in a mainstream setting, and this could tie in with the training and support that's gone into mainstream staff to keep children with significant need in a mainstream setting. That's seen as a positive?
Yeah, I mean, just above, we always say with a target, we have a tolerance around the target, hence why this one is showing as achieving its target, because, you know, an absolute percentage particularly could, you know, we try not to look at half a child or a full child, but in the grand scheme of this kind of number, it can fluctuate year on year. So we don't believe, we set with Heather Sandy as Executive Director for Children's, we set a tolerance around the target to say when would we feel that that was outside of where we would want it to be, either above or below, because of some of those fluctuations. And that's why this one is showing as within target as a green tick.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I do not see any further speakers, so I will move that the board supports the recommendation set out on page 204 of the report and ask our comments are captured by Kiara as designated scrutiny officer, be shared with the executive ahead of their consideration of a decision. Do all those in favour, please? Do I have a seconder first, actually? Thank you. All those in favour, please? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? No. Thank you. Right, thank you for that. We'll now move on to item 8, which is the Scrutiny Committee work programmes. You will find this report on pages 255 to 270 of the agenda. It provides us with an update with the activity undertaken by the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee and the Public Protection and Community Scrutiny Committee for Lincolnshire since the last update on the 24th of August 2023. The report also presents us with an overview of each committee's planned activity for the rest of the year and into 2024. So the report invites us to review and comment on the contents of the report and record our satisfaction with the activity undertaken and endorse the activity planned for 23-24. And the report will be presented in 2 parts. So we'll start with the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the brief report for you. The committee has met twice since the last update we gave in August and considered items as set out on pages 258 to 259 at our meetings held in September and October. Of the 9 items considered at these 2 meetings, 7 of them were for pre-decision scrutiny, so that was quite a heavy workload for that meeting. At our September meeting, the committee supported a proposed decision by the executive for the acquisition of freehold interest at Bone Mill Lane in Sleaford and the use of Section 203 of the Housing and Planning Act 2016 to override restricted covenants on the land, and this is for a new Lincolnshire secure children's home. The council has been running a highly successful 12-bedded children's secure unit in Sleaford since 1997. Unfortunately, the building is no longer fit for purpose and the current site does not offer the opportunity for expansion. And in a previous life, I remember visiting that site, so I can understand that. The Department of Education has been working with Lincolnshire to progress a new build secure children's home since 2017. And it's been agreed that a new 28-bed facility should be built to address the shortfall in places and to provide better value for money. And we look forward to receiving the decision report for the full scheme appraisal for the new secure children's home at our meeting on the 8th of March. And from what I've seen so far, it'll be a state-of-the-art unit. I have one change to report to our work programme as set out on pages 260 to 263, and that's the item on the primary school mobile replacement scheme. Has been deferred from the 12th of January meeting to the 8th of March meeting. This now means we have 7 items on the March agenda, so we'll be reviewing the items listed for that agenda. The committee's next meeting will be held on the 8th of December, where we will be reviewing the current childcare sufficiency position in Lincolnshire and considering 2 pre-decision scrutiny items on the insourcing of the catering service at the Lincolnshire Secure Unit and the refurbishment of the Mile Cross and Cherry Willingham Children's Centres to enable the expansion of alternative provision places. Due to the large number of pre-decision scrutiny items currently being considered by the committee at each meeting, several non-time critical items have been deferred into 2024. And that concludes my update. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to the Public Protection and Communities Scrutiny Committee. This will be presented by the Vice Chairman, Councillor Paul Skinner, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Since our last update to the board, the committee has met 2 times and considered 10 items in total. The report within your agenda pack provides a brief account of discussions held on pages 264 to 266. At our meeting in October, we considered a proposed decision by the Executive in relationship to future funding for citizens' advice in Lincolnshire. The committee welcomed and supported the continuation of the funding and the recommendation to move to a 3-year grant funding agreement with annual increases in line with the national living wage. Some disappointment was expressed, however, that the level of funding would only be increased by £17,236 on the 1st of April 2024. This was to reflect the current 6.2 increase in the national living wage, and no additional award had been provided to Citizens Advice to recognise that they had no funding increase since 2018-2019, even though there had been cost of living increases, especially over the last 2 years. It was noted that Lincolnshire County Council was one of the several funders of the Citizens Advice Service in Lincolnshire. Our next meeting is on the 12th of December, where the committee will be considering the Multiply Numeracy programme and the activities being delivered in a 2-year of Department of Education funded programme. The Lincolnshire Fire Service and Rescue Draft Community Risk Management Plan 24 to 28, which is currently subject to public consultation, and the outcomes of His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services inspection of Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service, and a pre-decision scrutiny item on the Council's coronal toxicology services. Excuse the teeth, Chairman. There is one change to be reported to our work programme as set out on pages 267 to 270. The item of serious violence in Lincolnshire, a partnership response position report, has been deferred from the 12th of December to the 19th of March meeting. This will allow for a draft serious violence strategy to be submitted to the Home Office in January, and if accepted, this would then be published in February. That concludes my update. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that, and thank you for both of you for your presentations. We have got a question from Councillor Lee, please.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Actually, I'm on that committee and I've campaigned for extra funding for Citizens Advice for about the last 18 months. So I was really, really pleased to see this. I do have concerns that they hadn't had a raise for 5 years, and I hear all the comments about, you know, other people fund them as well, but I suspect those other people don't have quite the size budget that Lincolnshire County Council has, or the size of underspend that we have either. So I think that's pertinent, but I'm really pleased that they've got a much more secure deal, because I think it's very, very important for all of the people that we represent right across the county, that in a cost of living crisis they can go and get free advice somewhere. So I'm very pleased to see this. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further comments from the board? No. So I would like to thank the presenters for their detailed reports and move that the board's satisfaction of the work undertaken be recorded and the board endorse the work programmes that have been developed to date. All those in favour, please. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 9, which is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report 23-24 Quarter 2. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the revenue spending compared with budgets for the 23-24 financial year. This is an overview of the financial position supported by detailed appendices. A decision is taken by the Executive on the 5th of December in relation to this item. So our actions are that we consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendation to the Executive as set out on page 274 of the report, and to agree that our comments be passed to the Executive in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director for Finance. Over to you, Michelle, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So the report summarises our forecast against the revenue budget approved for the current financial year, which is 23-24, and more details of the financial position are included in the report appendices that start on the table on page 283. The appendices also include updates on our use of reserves and our development fund initiatives. So on our revenue budget, we're currently reporting an underspend of 18.4 million, with 11.6 of this relating to service budgets, 3.6 relating to other budgets, and £3.2 million of additional funding which relate to our business rates pool. The underspend mainly reflects one-off exceptional items which include additional income from our energy from waste plant on the sale of electricity, additional traffic regulation order income from the highways department, and lower expected or budgeted for energy costs on our street lighting and property electricity budgets. The position provides an opportunity to proactively make capital investments specific to the services where underspends are relevant, and investment is required in those particular services. And the report proposes use of service underspends to meet the needs of capital projects relating to these services, namely investment required in the waste transfer stations, utilising the additional income from the energy from waste plant, Cross Keys Bridge electrification, utilising the additional income from the highways traffic regulation orders, and LED bulb swap out for street lighting using the electricity underspend that we currently are forecasting. Each of these are just proposals to move budget, and any decision to move forward with these projects would go through the normal decision-making process. If these proposals are accepted, then these movements will leave a remaining underspend of 9.6 million, which is around 1.6% of our net budget. Whilst the report states a continuing strong financial resilience and position of the County Council, it's worth noting that we're still reporting pressures within our service areas, which include areas such as increased demand of education healthcare plans, demand on the cost of social care placements and provision, and school transport, which are currently being offset by underspends and the use of contingency and reserves. So I'm happy to take any question from members and any comments that they would like to pass back to the Executive when they review the report.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Do we have any questions? Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chairman. What steps are being taken to reduce the risks of using interim beds for adult social care and community wellbeing? Because there's obviously a financial implication as well as potentially less beneficial for the patient. And secondly, Michelle, you mentioned that transport overspends are being used by reserve and contingency. How much longer could we do that on that basis? Is there any concern that the overspends will continue and not be reduced? And how long will they take to be on an even keel, do you reckon? Thank you.
The comment on interim beds isn't something I can cover, so I'll let Debbie cover that in a second. The school transport budget, so members might recall that when we set the budget for the current year, we allowed for a £9 million contingency that we set aside. That we expect to be using some of that, but not all of that, and that is a base budget contingency. So we expect that is covered. The team are currently reviewing all of that, and we will look to see what we need to build into future budgets. But I'll then let Debbie comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. So the position to support discharge from hospital across what we call the intermediate care layer, so this is when people would need beds for a short period of time to promote independence until they go home, is an incredibly complex one. So we procure transitional care beds, resettlement beds. The Community Health Trust has community hospitals and also commissioned transitional care beds. The Hospital Trust has got a separate arrangement in place. And so we're working to bring all of that together into a single procurement through a comprehensive sort of risk-sharing agreement with health around a single intermediate care layer, which is all called the same thing, so that there is an understanding in terms of what type of pathway you would be having from hospital and therefore what you need. We had hoped to get an intermediate care layer designed, ready for April of next year. We haven't been able to lock that down fully because it is incredibly complex trying to seek and understand your level of demand. And so we don't think the procurement will happen in April, but we are keeping the scrutiny committee up to date, and we expect it to be between sort of 9 and 6 months delay before then we can look at a procurement around that. So certainly for 2025, we would hope to have a comprehensive intermediate care layer in place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Marfleet, please.
Just on that, if I'm not mistaken as well, it actually brings much better value right across the board, because the two organisations were slightly adrift on what they were paying for the beds, and it will be a great achievement because it starts to set, in effect, we are great commissioners, and actually they've got a lot that they could really benefit and learn by just working a bit more with us. So it sets a really good standard going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments? Councillor Brockway, please.
Yeah, it's more a comment than a question, or a slight question. I think this is a really good paper. When I was reading this, I noticed an underspend, and I thought, why have we got this underspend? And then you go further into the paper and the explanation is there. The way you've done it is very clear, and I like the fact that you've managed to make a financial paper accessible in the way members of the public can read it. I think it's very important the way you're doing that. I did notice further in the paper, that there's going to be an increase in additional traffic regulation orders coming in, and so expecting revenue. Why do you expect that to happen? Thank you.
So the additional income that we've generated through TROs, I understand, is from the fines that we impose on utility companies for when they act on the road, and the fine mechanism is meant to be a deterrent, but it's clearly not deterring in the way that it's originally designed to, so it's creating an income for us. But as I say, the fine is there as a deterrent in terms of the utility companies acting on the highway.
Thank you. Are there any further comments? Although I do prefer spreadsheets over a normal report like this, but that's the accountant in me. But yeah, so I've got no further comments, so I will move that the board supports the recommendation set out on page 274 of the report, and ask that our comments captured by Kiara, our designated scrutiny officer, be shared with the executive ahead of their consideration of a decision. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Kendrick. All those in favour, please? That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 10, which is another financial report, which is the Capital Budget Monitoring Report for 23-24 Quarter 2. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on the capital investment compared with the budgets for the 23-24 financial year. A detailed programme can be seen within Appendix A, together with the narrative on progress against key investment schemes. A decision is taken by the Executive on the 5th of December in relation to this item, and our actions are that we consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations of the Executive as set out on page 305 of the report, and that we agree that our comments be passed to the Executive in relation to this item. And this report will also again be presented by Michelle Grady, please.
Thank you. I'm sure we can assist with the spreadsheets if you'd like, Councillor Stokes. We all like a good spreadsheet. So the second report provides an update on the capital investment compared to our planned programme, and reflects any changes that we've implemented around the funding required and phasing of the delivery of the programme. The programme is currently forecasting to underspend around 21 million against a net programme of 146 million. And this underspend predominantly relates to the corporate capital contingency, which we have held to address pressures within the programme and to support opportunities to invest not previously programmed in, rather than underspends on specific projects. So we continue to review the programme and ensure that we're maximising our investment opportunities, whilst we're ensuring that we've got a long-term financial affordable programme. And we are reviewing the use of this contingency as part of the budget setting process to make sure we're maximising the use of that. So the narrative on page 323 onwards gives an update on the individual key projects within each service area, and the end of the report includes the proposed additions to the capital programme following on from the recommendations in the revenue report. So I'll leave it there and ask for any questions or comments.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions from the board? No? Well, I've got one on page 308. So I think it's just probably the title of the line that is a bit, not confusing, I just think it's perhaps needs a bit more work, if I'm honest. And that's the Chief Finance Officer and it's other. And it just looks like 18 million is set aside to the Chief Finance Officer, which is not the case. And we all know within the paperwork it's not. I'm just thinking, can we in future just make that a bit clearer, please?
Yeah, that specifically relates to the corporate contingency that I've just mentioned, which isn't related to any service area, but we'll update the narrative so it's clear about what that is. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on this? No? Well, thank you for that, Michelle. So I move from the chair that the board supports the recommendations set out on page 305 of the report and ask that comments are captured by Chiara to be shared with the executive ahead of their consideration of a decision. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Smith, all those in favour, please? It's unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 11, which is Treasury Management Performance 23-24 Quarter 2. This report details the Treasury Management activities and performance for Quarter 2 of the 23-24 to the 30th of September 23. Comparing this to the Treasury Management Strategy and Annual Investment Strategy 23-24, that was approved by the Executive Councillor for Resources, Communications and Commissioning on the 13th of March. Our actions are that the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board review and report and pass any comments onto the Executive Councillor for Resources, Communications and Commissioning. And this report will be introduced by Sue Maycott, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Starting with the key points on the economy and interest rates. So first of all, the Consumer Price Index has now started to fall, with the latest report showing it at 4.6% in October. And this is because the energy price caps have fallen out of the calculation. And this has triggered a turning point in terms of short-term interest rates. And the Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee has kept the rate at 5.25% for the last 2 meetings. So the markets and our Treasury Management advisors are now thinking that base rates have peaked at this level and will be expected to fall in 2024, probably to around the region of around 3% by 2026. Long-term interest rates have risen recently due to the inflation levels, and the current levels are between 4.9% and 5.2%. But again, these are expected to fall by 2026. Moving on to investments, the Council's cash balances fell to £258 million at the end of September, and this is because they're being used to fund both revenue expenditure, as you'd expect, but also capital expenditure because we haven't borrowed this year. At the same time, the weighted average maturity of the investment fund fell to 121 days, and it was 153 days in the last quarter. And this is because we were keeping our investments shorter to meet our liquidity requirements forecast to the end of the year. The investment return for the period was 4.877%, which is just under the SONIA benchmark rate, but was on a par with the benchmarking group and still above the average for other English counties. So with our cash balances forecast to fall due to this planned internal borrowing rather than borrowing externally, our investment performance is forecast to fall off somewhat going forwards, and this is because our strategic long-term investments are going to be restricted to maintain liquidity, so we're keeping them shorter. But on the flip side to this, we're saving on borrowing costs because we're not borrowing externally. So moving on to borrowing, our borrowing requirement at the end of the period was 135.5 million, and that's after adjusting for capital programme underspends brought forward from the previous year. And as I've said, we're intending to meet all of that from internal borrowing using our cash balances, and that's in line with the debt liability benchmark prudential indicator. So this strategy will bring down our cash balances and increase our internal borrowing level, which stood at around £200 million at the 31st of March 23. Our external borrowing will also reduce over the year, and this is due to the natural maturity of debt that we hold in the year. So we're expecting it to be around 457 million by the end of the year at an average cost of 3.713%. During the period, we took temporary borrowing of £11 million at a cost of 5.25%, and that was to support liquidity. There was £5 million of that outstanding at the end of the period, but that's been repaid since then. Then in the report, there are 3 other Treasury management issues just to quickly comment on. The first is that we've undertaken a tendering procedure for the Council's banking provision, and we can now announce that the new 5-year contract, which starts next April, has been awarded to our incumbent bank, which is Barclays. We're awaiting another consultation from the Department for Levelling Up and Housing Communities on changes to the statutory guidance on minimum revenue provision, which is the charge that we make for our capital financing. Any changes to this are likely to be effective from 1st of April next year, and we think it's going to be focusing on minimum revenue provision relating to commercial investments, but until we actually see it, we don't know. And then finally, the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, which was introduced in May of last year, set out some investment and borrowing risk metrics for councils in England. And if breached, those metrics would give the government the ability to intervene. There was a consultation on this which closed in September, seeking views on the appropriate calculation for those metrics, and we think they're likely to be effective from next April. There are 4 metrics, and we don't have any particular concerns about how we would show on those metrics at this point in time. So they're the key points, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions on this report? Councillor Brockway, please.
Thank you. Yes, thanks for this report. Again, very clearly written. Thank you. Could I just ask a question, something that I didn't understand, which is if you go on to the link group, the monthly investment analysis review, in the first page, and could I put a plea in here? Is there any way of making this section more screen friendly? This is the way SIPFA used to do their reports. You get this tiny, tiny typing, then you make it big enough and you can't get the whole line in. So if there's any way of making this screen friendly, I'd really appreciate it. I have a question in the first paragraph of this, the general economy paragraph. It talks about the period marking, talking about the reduction, contraction in manufacturing output, etc., and the steepest decline in service sector activity in 32 months. Now, I don't understand that because there's such huge demand on service sector activity, both in the public and the private sector. I don't understand how we can therefore see a decline in the activity. And could you just explain that to me, please? Thank you.
I'm not sure I can actually. No, I think we'll have to have a look at that and come back to you if that's okay. Yeah, because that report's come straight from our Treasury Management Advisors. We haven't written that ourselves, so we'll have a look at that.
Thanks. I did wonder that because of the different typing, but if you could find that out, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the floor? No. I've got one just regarding Link's report as well, actually. On page 352, I noticed there's a lot. I know this report goes to the end of September, so I will put that in there. There are a lot of investments that have matured. I'm assuming that they've now been moved or remained in the position that they were at. Because if you look at most of them at the top, I've gone past the maturity date. So I'm just wondering if that's all been sorted out by Link. Thank you.
Yes, that is as at the 30th of September, so they will have moved on since then.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No? Then I will move that the board endorse the report and record our satisfaction of the overall performance, reported as well with the assurances given by officers to concerns as discussed. And I ask that our comments are captured and be shared with the Executive Councillor for further consideration. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Skinner. All those in favour, please. Thank you, that's unanimous. So we'll now move on to item 12, which is People Management Update Quarter 2. This report provides an update on the HR management information for Quarter 2, 23-24, as well as a summary of the people strategy and the outcomes of the past 2 years. And our actions are that we are to review the report and seek assurance on HR management information and people strategy. And this report will be presented by Tony Kavanagh, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody, although it's nearly afternoon. So, in terms of the Quarter 2 performance, this has been largely, I would say, a success in terms of that we've seen a continued decrease in our voluntary turnover, which is 8.41%, as you'll see, as well as our sickness absence, which is 7.22 days per employee. So, we've seen a a steady decline over the last 12 months in both of those areas. One area where spend is up is around, or performance is up, is around the agency spend. So whilst we have seen a decline in our on-contract agency spend, which is through the matrix contract, you'll note it in Q2, we had around a £50,000 reduction there on contract expenditure. We have seen a rise on off contracts. I did raise this in the last month for Q1, which is largely related to the model we have within educational psychology, and the fact that it is a model that is more cost effective because it's based on activity, and so the spending there has gone up. But overall, you will see that in terms of our metrics, performance is good in terms of that significant decline in both sickness and voluntary turnover over the past 12 or more months. In relation to the gender pay gap, so picking up items from the people strategy, again, this has been whilst clearly we would want to see gender pay on a 0 for 0 basis fundamentally, so that there's no potential inbuilt disbalance between the two genders. Clearly, as with most organisations, public organisations, there is a gap between male and female employees. You'll note that from Lincolnshire County Council's perspective, in terms of the mean gender pay, we've improved by 1.5% from last year. And whilst the median gender pay gap has had ever such a slight increase of 0.1%, we are in an excellent position when you compare us to the national medium gender pay gap, which is at 14.9%. So I think as a council, we can clearly not rest on our laurels, but clearly be pleased with the progress that we've made over the last few years. As you'll see there, I'm not going to go through this in any significant detail, but the people strategy is just over 2 years old now, and I just wanted to provide some assurance to members regarding progress within some of those aspects of the people strategy that were evident in 2021 and now where we are in 2023. Again, clearly, as ever, there is still lots to do in respect of the workforce, but you will see from 3.2.2 that there's been some steady but good progress in relation to some of the people factors within the council. So I'll stop there, Chairman, and happy to take questions.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions on this report? Councillor Brockway, please.
Yeah, sorry, I think I sometimes feel guilty that I keep popping up here. It's just that these things are so interesting. Yeah, when you were talking about the courses, there are just over 5,000 employees, 5,200 and something, 2008, I think I remember. And you've managed to achieve a number of something like 10,000 health and safety related courses, which I think is very impressive because that's almost 2 per person. What's the spread of people taking? Who is actually taking up those courses? Is it, you know, say one person taking up 20 courses, or is this spread throughout? How does it work, and what type of things are they doing? It's very interesting, that is.
Thanks, Councillor Brockway. You've moved on to the last item, I believe, which is the annual report. And whilst I'd love to answer that question, my colleague to my left will be able to. No problem.
Mr. Kyle,
it's the
please.
Excitement, Chairman.
Well, yeah, it is, isn't it? Mr. Kyle, please.
So thank you for the report. We talked about gender pay gap and the mission to continue that work there. Are those figures gross or net pay, just out of interest? And the other one is the EdPsych costs. Is that regarding the HCPs, or is that some other area?
Thanks, Mr. Kyle. In terms of the gender pay gap, that will be based on, my understanding is it will be based on gross pay. In respect of the overall payments that are made to employees and those from the employer. Could you just repeat your last question, sorry, about the educational psychology?
Yeah, just around seeing that overspend. I guess the question is, what is the use? What are we using educational psychologists for?
I'll defer to the Chief Executive on this matter.
Yeah, I know this one. Thank you very much. Traditionally, we had an in-house education psychology model, and then because of the demands around the increase in education, health and care plans, that team were really struggling to keep up with demand and keep up with capacity, and also balance the need between, I suppose, preventative work in schools and then non-preventative work in schools. And so we've moved to a model where we currently don't routinely employ a team of educational psychologists to do our education, health and care plans. They're on a contracted off-spend basis. And so our model is now to, if you like, fund contracted education psychologists on each of the education, health and care plan assessments that they do. It works out to be a much more cost-effective model because we're buying exactly what we need and we can flex that to meet the demand of the services. And as you'll know, there'll be peaks and troughs during the year as well. So it is more cost effective, but what it means for the reporting is that we have off-contract spend for educational psychologists, but actually, and whilst in many cases that would seem to be not a good thing, it actually suits our needs because of the flux in demands around education, health and care plans.
Thank you very much. And do we find when we're looking at these educational, so there's an overspend there, so when we find we're looking at them and we're looking at the HCP requests, do we find that local authority schools have already submitted with EdPsych reports, and is this a duplicated cost?
So just to say, it's not over budget, because this is what the budget that was in the budget that used to fund existingly employed staff is now used for. So it's not a duplication. We haven't got other education psychologists doing the education, health and care plans. This is how we deliver the model. So it's not an overspend, although it feels like an overspend in the way that it's reported, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, and I was thinking around when we submit for HCPs, schools might have already had an educational psychologist report submitted with that, but in some cases, but this still needs to be an educational psychologist report done. Is it independently, and that's a need, and that's kind of legislative, and that has to happen. These sign off the education, health and care plan. So if an individual school has procured some preventative work around education psychologists, then that doesn't negate the statutory need to sign off the education, health and care statement. They don't have to be independent because the model that many local authorities have is that they also employ educational psychologists to sign off. So they're not independent in terms of that way, but it is a statutory function which would continue to be needed if the parents request it or if it reaches threshold, even if there was preventative work commissioned by the individual school earlier.
Thank you. Do we have any further comments or questions? No. So I will move that the board endorses the report and record our satisfaction of the overall performance and outcomes reported, as well as with assurances given by officers in relation to matters discussed. Are we all in favour? Thank you. And we'll now go on to item 13, which is unlucky for some. Health and Safety Annual Report 2022-23. This report can be found on pages 373 to 390 of the agenda pack. The report provides an overview of key achievements, activities and statistics across all directorates related to Lincolnshire County Council's compliance and implementation of health and safety legislation and its statutory duties. So our action is to review the report and to seek assurance and comment on the contents of the Health and Safety Annual Report 22-23. And this report will be presented by Fraser Shooter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll just go through some of the key points. The first one to know, and one I'm pleased to report back in, is relation to no enforcement action, intervention or prosecution from the HSE, which is always a positive position to be in. In relation to training, as already indicated, we continue to see an increase in the number of employees accessing their health and safety training via our e-learning platform. We've seen over 10,000 individual courses completed within that year. That showed a 12% increase on previous years. And to answer the question, that's a fairly reasonable spread across the whole authority. We offer around 15 or 16 individual e-learning courses and have continued to increase the number of subjects that we offer through e-learning. There will be some employees who do multiple courses because it's relevant for their job. There will be some employees who just do the mandatory courses that's required as part of our corporate policy. And there will be employees who undertake courses that are relevant for their role and just that. So we don't restrict access to those training. They're on Links to Learn. They're accessible for staff to undertake. So some staff do take that opportunity and undertake the course, whether it's really relevant for their role or not, and we don't restrict that. So, but it's positive to see that that seems to be the primary way in which our employees do access their courses. We still do deliver classroom courses for some more complex type courses that we deliver, one being our new Managing Health and Safety training course that we've implemented. That was brought in relation to a limited level of assurance that we had regarding the health and safety training of our managers. The implementation of that course has resulted in us being able to move that assurance level into an improving category, with the expectation if we continue to deliver that course, we'll be able to move that into more of a substantial level of assurance when it comes to health and safety training of our managers. Also, another positive when it comes to our team internally, we saw the completion of our first ever apprenticeship programme within health and safety. That was a relatively new national apprenticeship scheme which we took advantage of. The individual who we had in placement successfully passed their final exam, gaining a level 3 qualification, and since passing that has successfully moved into a permanent position within our team as a health and safety advisor. So that's a real positive when it comes to providing opportunities within the council. And then one sort of major one, and sort of brings everything together in relation to the work we do as a health and safety team, is when it comes down to the actual incident and accident reporting system. Although the numbers remain fairly consistent, we have seen a slight decrease in the number of accidents, which is, again, a positive. We have seen a slight increase in the number of near misses reported, but that primarily comes as a result of our relatively new system. We've had it in place for just under 3 years, and that system gives the ability now for staff to report near misses, which we didn't have in the past. So there's been a bit of an education over the last couple of years to get staff into the culture of reporting near misses and not just waiting for incidents to actually result in harm or injury. So that's a result of that sort of communication and promotion that system allows that ability for staff to report near misses. But in relation to the severity of the accidents we're having, what we're seeing is the amount of time off as a result of work-related injuries has taken a massive reduction, which is a real positive. So yes, the number of incidents we're having remain consistent, but the severity, the harm it's causing, and the amount of time lost is taking a massive reduction, which is an excellent position to be in and another positive. So I'm happy to take any questions that anybody else has got in relation to the report.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions? Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, I was just looking in the report and the recent offer of 2 12-week physical activity programmes, Heart and Soul and Miles Better. I was just wondering what the take-up's been for those.
Yeah, that element of the report comes from our health and wellbeing team. So they produce that element of the report. So I'm happy to take that away, ask the question and report back to you on that.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions from the board? No? No? Well, thank you. So I will move from the chair that the board endorse the report and record our satisfaction of the overall performance, key outcomes, actions, supports and future priorities identified and reported, as well as with assurances given by officers in relation to the matters discussed. Can you please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you. Thank you for that. So we'll now move on to item 14, which is proposals for scrutiny review by Scrutiny Panel A, responses by Scrutiny Committees. This report can be found on pages 391 to 404 of the agenda pack. The report follows on the request made by this board in our meeting on the 28th of September to scrutiny committees to consider whether it has a topic that would benefit from an in-depth scrutiny review by Scrutiny Panel A. The overview and scrutiny committees considered this request at their meetings in October and November 23. 4 topics have been identified, which is A, young carers, B, children's services, workforce, recruitment and retention, C, physical exercise in communities and schools, and D, vapes. These topics were evaluated through the scrutiny prioritisation toolkit for scrutiny reviews to produce a priority matrix, which is set out Appendix A. So our actions are to, 1, to agree the topic for the in-depth scrutiny review to be undertaken by Scrutiny Panel A, taking into consideration the priority matrix at Appendix A, and 2, to agree the draft terms of reference for the scrutiny review as set out in Appendix B, subject to finalisation by Scrutiny Panel A for subsequent approval by the board. And this report will be presented by Nigel West. Nigel, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you said, this item gives you, as an Overview Scrutiny Management Board, an opportunity to agree the next topic for Scrutiny Panel A for them to review. And we have invited all the scrutiny committees of the Council to nominate topics, and 4 topics have been identified as potential to come to this panel. These have been evaluated, as you said, through the scrutiny prioritisation matrix, and young carers has come out on top of the toolkit, as you'll see on Appendix A, and it's really a matter for the board to decide the next topic. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, and glad to see that the policy team are here to help me with any technical questions on the prioritisation matrix. But thank you, Chairman. That's the report.
Thank you, Nigel. Do we have any questions? Councillor Kendrick, please.
Thank you, Jay. It's actually more of a comment. I'd just like to say thank you to all the members of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. The fact that the 3 items on the list are from my committee indicates the level of engagement actually that members on the committee have had and the interest they've taken. Obviously, I have a view on my favourite one, and it seems to be top of the list, so I'll leave it at that, Chairman. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions? No? So, looking at the priority matrix, I will first of all like to record our thanks to the Overview and Scrutiny Committees for their responses. But on the basis of Appendix A and the priority matrix, I will move that the board supports the topic young carers to be allocated to Scrutiny Panel A to undertake an in-depth review as soon as it is practical to do so, and ask that the draft terms of reference for this scrutiny review as set out in Appendix B be accepted subject to final agreement by Scrutiny Panel A. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Murphy, thank you. All those in favour, please? That's unanimous, so that's agreed. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 15, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board Work Programme. And that report is on pages 405 to 416 of the pack and provides an overview of the contents of our own work programme. Although we do not normally debate this item and our action is to note its contents, therefore I move that the report be noted with the caveat that any necessary amendments identified since the publication of this agenda will be incorporated by a designated scrutiny officer. Can you please raise a hand if you agree, please? Thank you, that is agreed. So now that concludes the business of this meeting, and we've probably done that quicker than I expected. So I'd like to thank you all for your attendance, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you.